Welcome to Life Stories. In today's story, we dive into a wedding day that turns into a life or death emergency. Dr. Maya Thompson, a trauma surgeon, attends her old friend Ryan's wedding, only to discover that the bride, Sarah, is hiding serious symptoms of appendicitis. What follows is a race against time, filled with unexpected twists, deep emotions, and a reminder of the fragility of life. Join us as we explore this incredible journey of friendship, love, and the importance of acting when it matters most. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for today's story. It had been 5 long years since I'd last heard from Ryan. Medical school had been a whirlwind of late nights, endless exams, and moments of triumph and failure, all shared with a tight-knit group of friends. Among them, Ryan had always been a special one, my partner in studying, in celebrating the victories, and, most importantly, in supporting each other through the grueling demands of medical school. We had always been close, sharing everything from our dreams to our frustrations, helping each other stay sane through the chaos of it all. But after graduation, life took us down different paths. Ryan had returned to a small town, where he began working at a community hospital, while I took the bustling, high-pressure route of becoming a trauma surgeon in a busy city hospital. Our lives became a blur of patient care, surgeries, and late-night shifts. We lost touch, as people often do after big life changes. But I never forgot the bond we shared. That connection had always meant something to me. A year ago, out of the blue, Ryan had called. He was happy, happier than I'd ever heard him. He told me about a woman he'd met, someone who made him feel whole again after all the years of hard work and loneliness. Her name was Sarah, a kindergarten teacher who adored children and had a warmth about her that Ryan described as captivating. I could hear the joy in his voice as he spoke about her, the excitement he felt as their relationship blossomed. He sounded lighter, as if he'd found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. It was a rare, genuine happiness that I had always wished for him. Then, 2 weeks ago, I received a cream-colored envelope, resting among the piles of patient files and medical journals on my desk. My first thought was that it was another wedding invitation, a reminder of the many weddings I'd missed over the years. But as soon as I saw Ryan's name written in gold calligraphy, my heart skipped a beat. It was an invitation to his wedding with Sarah. I hadn't seen Ryan in years, and the thought of missing such an important moment in his life stirred something deep inside me. I knew I had to be there. Despite the years that had passed, I couldn't deny that Ryan was a significant part of my life. He had helped shape the person I had become, and meeting the woman who had captured his heart felt like a privilege I didn't want to miss. The wedding was in 2 weeks. I checked my schedule. Unfortunately, I was on call that weekend, a weekend that promised to be filled with emergencies and the usual chaos of the hospital. But I didn't want to let this opportunity slip by. I called Dr. Kapoor, a fellow surgeon I'd worked with for years, asking if she could cover my shift. She agreed without hesitation, knowing how much this meant to me. It felt like a small miracle, as if the universe was aligning perfectly to bring me back to Ryan at this pivotal moment. I confirmed my attendance with a quick message to Ryan, who responded almost immediately. "Can't believe you're coming. It's been too long. Sarah's excited to meet you." His excitement was palpable, and I couldn't help but smile at his words. I looked forward to seeing him again and, of course, meeting Sarah, the woman who had made him so happy. The days that followed passed in a blur. There were surgeries to complete, patient consultations to attend, and paperwork to catch up on. But my mind couldn't stop drifting back to the wedding. What would Sarah be like? I'd heard so much about her, but I didn't know if I'd be able to recognize her just by what Ryan had told me. Would she live up to the image he'd painted of her? I knew she was a kindergarten teacher, a woman who loved children, and had a heart full of warmth. I imagined someone soft-spoken, kind, and nurturing. But would she be as radiant as Ryan made her out to be? The night before the wedding, I packed a simple blue dress for the occasion. Nothing too extravagant, just something comfortable yet fitting for the occasion. The ceremony was to take place in a small town, a couple of hours outside the city. and I planned to drive there early the next morning to make sure I had enough time to settle in before everything started. As I drove, my thoughts were filled with memories of Ryan, of the late-night study sessions we'd shared, of the unspoken understanding we had always had. I wondered what he would be like now, years removed from medical school, and if this new chapter in his life would change him. The hotel where the wedding was taking place was charming, set in a lush garden with flowers in full bloom. It felt like something out of a storybook. A perfect setting for a day that would change Ryan and Sarah's lives forever. I checked into my room and quickly changed into my dress. The excitement I'd felt earlier seemed to build within me, and despite my usual calm demeanor, there was a nervous energy in my chest. I was about to witness something beautiful, Ryan's wedding. As I walked toward the garden where the ceremony was to be held, I took in the decorations, white chairs lined up in rows. A flower-covered arch that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. The scene was stunning. I found a seat near the back, unsure if I'd recognize anyone. It had been years since I'd seen some of these people, and I didn't know if any of them would even remember me. Then, I saw him. Ryan was standing at the front of the ceremony, looking nervous but incredibly happy. When he saw me, his face broke into the widest smile, and he waved enthusiastically. I waved back, feeling a rush of affection for my old friend. It had been far too long. As the music began and the guests stood in anticipation, I turned to see Sarah walking down the aisle. She was stunning in a white wedding dress, her beauty unmistakable, but as I watched her walk, something caught my trained eye. She seemed unsteady, and there was something off about her expression. Her smile appeared forced, almost as if she was in pain. A sense of unease washed over me. I couldn't ignore what I was seeing. Something wasn't right. As Sarah made her way down the aisle, most of the guests saw nothing but the picture-perfect bride, graceful, radiant, and full of joy. But my doctor's instincts kicked in. The unsteadiness in her walk, the pale complexion beneath the makeup, and the tightness of her smile all signaled something was wrong. I couldn't help but study her every movement, each step she took down the aisle. Her right hand gripped her bouquet with a strange intensity, while her left hand occasionally pressed against her side. It wasn't just wedding nerves, this was something more. I tried to shake off my growing concern as the ceremony began. It was beautiful, no doubt, but my mind kept drifting back to Sarah. Every time she shifted, every time she moved, my gaze followed her, trying to piece together the puzzle. The longer I watched, the more I realized that the symptoms weren't just signs of wedding jitters. They were indications of something far more serious. When Sarah reached Ryan at the altar, I couldn't help but notice the small beads of sweat gathering on her forehead. Despite the mild temperature in the garden, I looked around at the guests, who were all captivated by the beauty of the ceremony, unaware of the pain Sarah was hiding beneath her carefully constructed smile. In that moment, I knew something was wrong, and my mind started running through possibilities. Appendicitis, food poisoning, or perhaps even a more obscure issue that I couldn't pinpoint yet. As the ceremony ended, I tried to push my worries aside. There were guests to congratulate, food to be eaten, and dancing to be done. But as I stood in line to congratulate the newlyweds, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease that refused to leave. When my turn came, Ryan pulled me into a warm hug, and I could feel his joy radiating through him. "Maya, I can't believe you're actually here. It's been too long," he said, his voice brimming with happiness. I smiled and returned his hug, trying my best to be present in the moment. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I replied, trying to shake off the concerns swirling in my mind. "Congratulations, Ryan." Turning to Sarah, I extended my hand. "It's wonderful to meet you, Sarah. Ryan's told me such great things about you." She smiled at me, but there was something off about her demeanor. As we shook hands, I noticed how she shifted her weight to one side, almost as though standing was difficult for her. Her palm felt clammy, and I could sense that she was trying to hide her discomfort. "Ryan talks about you all the time," Sarah said warmly. "He's always telling me about his brilliant friend from medical school. I'm glad you could come." She sounded genuine, But there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that made me question her well-being. Casually, I asked, "Are you feeling all right?" The excitement of the day can be overwhelming. I wanted to know if she was truly okay. But I also didn't want to draw too much attention to her condition in front of everyone. A flash of surprise crossed Sarah's face before she quickly replied, "I'm fine, just a little tired from all the planning." Her tone was quick and dismissive, but I could tell she was hiding something. I nodded, keeping my concerns to myself. Ryan, busy greeting other guests, didn't seem to notice the exchange. As I moved on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I kept my eye on Sarah throughout the evening, watching as she barely touched her food and excused herself from the table several times. Each time she returned, she seemed worse, more pale, more withdrawn. During dinner, I leaned in to quietly ask one of my old medical school friends, Dr. Vic, if he knew anything about Sarah's health. "Does anyone know if Sarah has any health problems?" I asked him quietly. Dr. Vic shook his head. "Not that I know of." "Why? I'm just wondering," I replied, though the worry in my voice was clear. I didn't want to make a scene. But something was wrong, and I could feel it in my bones. As the night wore on, I watched Ryan and Sarah take the floor for their first dance. They moved together with grace. But halfway through the song, Sarah stumbled slightly. Ryan caught her, laughing it off for the guests. But I saw the pain that flashed across Sarah's face. It was brief but unmistakable. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was seriously wrong, and I couldn't wait any longer. As the evening continued, I saw Sarah talking with her mother in a corner of the room. Then, I noticed her slip 2 small pills from her purse. Pain medication, I thought. It was then that I knew something had to be done. Without a moment's hesitation, I decided to follow her when she excused herself again. As I walked through the hallways of the hotel, I found her leaning against the wall, her eyes closed, struggling to breathe. I approached her carefully. "Sarah, I don't mean to intrude, but as a doctor, I'm concerned. You're showing signs of significant pain. Is everything all right?" She opened her eyes, looking embarrassed and nervous. "Please don't tell Ryan. I don't want to ruin our wedding day," she whispered, her voice strained. I could feel her pain, and I could see that she was trying to downplay it. But this was serious. "What's going on, Sarah?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "My stomach has been hurting badly since yesterday. I thought it was just stress. But it's getting worse." Her words sent a chill down my spine. As a trauma surgeon, I knew exactly what this could mean. "Where exactly is the pain?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Sarah placed her hand on the lower right side of her abdomen. Exactly where I feared it might be. My heart sank. This was bad. I touched her forehead with the back of my hand. "You're running a fever, too," I said quietly. Sarah looked around nervously, her eyes darting to make sure no one else was around. "It started 2 days ago. But it was just a dull ache. I thought it was just wedding stress. It got much worse this morning. But I couldn't postpone the wedding. Everything was arranged, and the guests had come from so far away." I nodded, my mind racing. The symptoms were pointing to something serious, appendicitis. "Sarah, I need to examine you properly. Is there a private room where we can go?" "Weekly," she nodded. "There's the bridal suite upstairs. I got ready there earlier." I helped Sarah walk toward the elevator, trying to act casual in case anyone passed by. But inside, my pulse was racing. This was a medical emergency, and I needed to act fast. We made our way to the elevator in silence. Sarah leaned against the wall, her eyes closed, her breath shallow and labored. I kept a steady arm around her waist, supporting her as much as I could. The last thing I needed was for her to collapse right there in the hall. So I walked as quickly as I dared, trying to keep my worry in check. As the elevator doors closed and the car ascended to the bridal suite, I couldn't help but glance at Sarah. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with a faint blue that made my heart ache. She was in real pain, and I knew I had to do something. And quickly. The problem was, we were in the middle of a wedding. People were dancing, Toasts were being made, and the joy of the day was in stark contrast to the emergency unfolding just a few steps away from the celebration. We arrived at the bridal suite, which was large, opulent, and still filled with the remnants of the wedding preparations. Makeup, hair accessories, a small overnight bag, it all seemed so out of place given the circumstances. I helped Sarah sit down on a small sofa, then moved to gather my thoughts. Sarah, I need to examine you. I know this is uncomfortable, but it's important, I said, trying to sound calm, though the reality of the situation was far from it. She nodded weakly, her eyes filled with gratitude. Please, just help me, she whispered. The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and it reminded me that my professional calm was the only thing standing between her and the potential disaster she could face. I quickly took out my phone, knowing I needed a second opinion on this. I dialed Dr. Patel, a colleague from the hospital who was always just a call away for situations like this. Dr. Patel, I said quickly, I need some advice. I'm with a woman in her early 30s who's just had severe pain in her lower right abdomen for over 24 hours. She's got a fever, and her pain is worsening. The symptoms suggest appendicitis, and I'm in a wedding venue. I need to know what to do next. Dr. Patel listened carefully, then confirmed my suspicions. It sounds like appendicitis, Maya. Given the duration and intensity of the pain, it's likely the appendix is on the verge of rupturing. She needs to get to a hospital immediately. The longer you wait, the higher the risk of infection spreading. His words hit me like a slap, and I turned back to Sarah, who had been trying to hold herself together, but her face was twisted in agony. Sarah, you have appendicitis, and it's advanced. If your appendix ruptures, it could cause a severe infection throughout your abdomen. We need to get you to a hospital immediately. Can you walk? Sarah's face drained of color as the reality of the situation set in. I didn't want to ruin our wedding, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Our first night as husband and wife. Your health is more important than anything else right now, I said gently, taking her hand. We can sort out the rest later. You need to get to a hospital before it gets worse. She nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, she said in a strained voice. But can we keep this between us? I don't want Ryan to worry. I don't want to spoil everything. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. You don't have to do this alone. Sarah, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll take care of you. Just as I was helping her to her feet, the door to the bridal suite suddenly opened, and Ryan walked in. His smile quickly faltered when he saw Sarah lying on the sofa, looking pale and weak, with me beside her. He rushed to her side, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. What's going on? Ryan asked urgently. Sarah, are you okay? Why didn't you tell me? She has appendicitis. Ryan, I said quickly, my voice calm but serious. Her condition is urgent. We need to get her to a hospital right away. Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief. Appendicitis? But it's our wedding day. How could this happen now? His medical training kicked in almost immediately. Without hesitation, he stood up and grabbed his phone. I'll get the car, he said. We'll leave as soon as possible. Maya, can you help her downstairs? I'll tell our parents what's happening. Ryan's calm focus gave me a sense of relief. It was clear that despite the shock of the situation, he was handling it with the professionalism I had always admired in him. I helped Sarah to her feet, keeping a hand firmly around her waist as she leaned into me for support. She looked up at me, tears still glistening in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I was so scared. I didn't want to ruin the day. You didn't ruin anything, I said softly. This is the most important thing. Your health comes first. Everything else can wait. We slowly made our way to the elevator, where Ryan was waiting with his father and Sarah's parents. Their faces were a mixture of concern and confusion as they looked at Sarah, supported between Ryan and me. Ryan's father stepped forward, eyes wide with worry. What's going on? He asked. What happened to her? She needs medical attention, Ryan said, his voice steady. We're going to the hospital. Please, just tell everyone what's happening. I don't want them to panic. As we made our way to the car, I glanced back at the reception hall. The music was still playing, and guests were laughing and dancing, completely unaware of the emergency unfolding just a few rooms away. The car ride to the hospital was tense. Ryan was driving as fast as he dared, but with the winding country roads, I knew we had to be cautious. Sarah was growing increasingly pale in the backseat, and I could feel the rapid pulse of her hand in mine. "Stay with us, Sarah," I said firmly, trying to keep her alert. "Talk to me. Tell me how you and Ryan met." Her weak smile was barely visible, but she started speaking anyway, recounting the story of how Ryan had been kind to one of her students, a little boy who had broken his arm. It was a tender moment, she recalled, the memory of Ryan's gentle care shining through even in the midst of pain. Ryan, glancing back at her in the rearview mirror, whispered, "We're almost there, Sarah. Just hold on. I'm not going anywhere." We were running out of time, but I could see the hospital lights in the distance. Every second mattered. As we arrived at the hospital, the emergency room staff was already waiting for us. The nurses wheeled Sarah in with urgency, and I quickly briefed them on the situation: suspected appendicitis, significant pain, and fever, with a high risk of rupture. The medical team responded immediately, preparing Sarah for surgery. Ryan remained by her side, his face pale and filled with concern, but his presence was steady and reassuring. The minutes felt like hours as we waited in the sterile, cold waiting room. My mind raced with thoughts of what could have happened if we hadn't acted in time. As a doctor, I knew how quickly things could spiral out of control, but I also knew that we had caught it just in time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Singh emerged from the operating room, his face weary but relieved. "The surgery was a success," he announced. "We removed the appendix, and it had ruptured, but we managed to clean the infection thoroughly. She'll need to stay in the hospital for a few days, but she's going to be fine." Ryan let out a deep breath, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he turned to me, his voice choked. "Thank you, Maya. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." I smiled, patting his shoulder. "That's what friends are for." A few days later, when Sarah was recovering in her hospital room, she looked at both of us with a grateful smile. "I guess the wedding didn't go exactly as planned, but at least I got to marry the love of my life. And I'm here, alive, thanks to you both." It wasn't the wedding night they had dreamed of, but it was a beginning, a new chapter for them. And for me as well. Sometimes, life doesn't unfold the way we expect, but it's in those unexpected moments that we truly find the depth of love, friendship, and what really matters. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible life stories.